You want to see somebody that responds to your house, your emergency, whether it's a medical call or a fire call, that looks like you.
President-elect's team, ultimately revises history whenever they want to.
So I just want to follow up on something you said earlier. You said there's no equivalence between the BLM protests and the January 6th riots.
Thanks for clicking. You won't be disappointed because I have 3 of what I think are the craziest, most interesting clips of the past week. So sit back and try not to have a psychotic embolism while you watch this insanity. Number 3, woke LA fire chief leaves no doubt that she is a danger to the public.
You want to see somebody that responds to your house, your emergency, whether it's a medical call or a fire call, that looks like you. It gives that person a little bit more ease, knowing that somebody might understand their situation better.
That's racist.
Is she strong enough to do this? Or you couldn't carry my husband out of a fire, which my response is, he got himself in the wrong place if I have to carry him out of a fire.
That's your job.
What the hell did that morbidly obese lesbian just say? She's literally the fire chief and just admitted that she can't do her job. If you're in trouble but too heavy for her to lift, I guess you're just out of luck. She says all of this without a hint of shame. And then other people thought it was a good idea to publish. My gut feeling is that nobody on this planet gives a damn what the skin color, sex, or sexual preferences of the person trying to save their life. Unless, of course, the person in the fire suit can't actually lift you to safety. This is another real-world example of the woke mind virus becoming terminal. How the hell do 3 lesbians named Christina run the LA Fire Department anyway? Maybe I'm insane, but that seems statistically unlikely. Let me know what you think in the comments. Number 2 for this week, PBS reporter is upset that people no longer trust them.
Of promises that are being made in that kind of way. I mean, it's very hard to hide your failure to contain a wildfire for any official of any party.
No, I mean, there's no sense that I'm getting from the people close to the transition, inside the transition, that are going to enter the administration, any concern about the promises that the president-elect has made, and especially the promises that he said he will just try to carry out on day one, which there is a hefty list. Yeah. You're right that that wildfires are obvious and people can see them, and I'm from Southern California, and I've dealt with wildfires my entire life when I lived there, but the president-elect's team, ultimately revises history whenever they want to. And they did it with January 6th, and more people voted for him in 2024 than they did in 2020. So when you take all of these things that people see in front of their eyes, Trump supporters and voters who supported him ultimately believe him over even what we report and believe him over the facts.
Right.
Gee, I wonder why.
Gee, maybe it's because everyone can see at this point that PBS is nothing more than taxpayer-funded, left-wing Democrat Party propaganda masquerading as fact-based news. No, if the facts work against their agenda, which they tell themselves is critical, then they will omit those facts or just straight-up lie to protect it, as they did with the Hunter Biden laptop scandal, which they bragged about helping to cover up. She's right. There is a lot of revisionist history going on about a lot of things, including January 6th. PBS has repeatedly taken part in spreading misinformation about January 6th, such as there were officers unalived by rioters that day. Blaming Trump for the 20-year death spiral of trusted media is so very typical of these fake reporters who fail to acknowledge that basically only Democrats trust them anymore because they're being told what they want to hear. That's actually a great segue to what I think is the craziest, most important clip of this past week. Number 1, the lead J6 investigator lies, then gets called out by a reporter.
All right, we think we have time for one more question. Coming in from the back.
How you doing? So I just want to follow up on something you said earlier. You said there's no equivalence between the BLM protests and the January 6th riots. So my question is, how can you say, aside from all the property damage and the burned homes, how can you say the violence was worse at the Capitol compared to BLM protests when many people were killed in the BLM/Antifa protests, but the protesters didn't kill anybody on January 6th? And just one short follow-up question, if I may. You mentioned in the book that the issue with misinformation on social media, which everyone would agree is an issue. Are you concerned about misinformation from sources like the local paper of note, the Washington Post, which did give everyone the false impression that the protesters had killed somebody on January 6th. He died the following day of natural causes. The Post did make that correction many months later, but most people didn't get that update. Anyway, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you for the question.
I'm not concerned about misinformation from the Washington Post. I generally trust the Washington Post and other credible sources of information. There were people who died as a direct result of their involvement in protecting the Capitol. So that's not misinformation. And I don't mean to suggest on the BLM protests in the summer of 2020 that they weren't serious, that they weren't worthy of a strong response, that people shouldn't have been held accountable. They absolutely were. My point is that they were just sort of fundamentally different than an attack on the seat of government. They were just a fundamentally different dynamic.
I'm curious, like, how do you think that one is worse, violence by committed against somebody? And I am curious, who, like, you say you trust everything in the Washington Post, and then you also say Officer Sicknick was killed associated to something that happened during the riot, but the Post itself followed up much later and said he died of natural causes.
No, Brian, the medical examiner found that Officer Sicknick died as a result of exposure to the chemical agents and the stress of defending the Capitol, exacerbating a pre-existing condition. That's a legal conclusion that I trust, that the Washington Post didn't make up.
No, I'm saying the Washington Post said otherwise. No.
Okay, I think our time for questions is done. Thank you so much.
Drive!
Would you please repeat the destination?
Oh, anywhere, just go!
I just love how aghast the DC audience is there when Matt Orfala drops some facts that they just can't handle because they've been propagandized with an alternate reality. All of the media was claiming that Brian Sicknick was unalived by rioters with a fire extinguisher.
At first, they told the country that Officer Sicknick was murdered with a fire extinguisher.
Officer Brian Sicknick died after being hit in the head with a fire extinguisher during the fight.
That story came from the New York Times, which is effectively the assignment editor for most of the rest of American media. It was a lie, untrue in any way.
Which was a straight up lie then and continues to be told now, so these clowns still believe it. Fact, Sicknick was natural causes, and there is no evidence that it had anything to do with January 6th. Another insidious lie that this lead investigator sneaks in is that people died as a result of their defending the Capitol.
Never happened.
What?
Never happened.
People is plural, so removing Sicknick, which we already know died of natural causes, what the hell is he talking about? Likely he's referring to other officers who unalived themselves later on, supposedly because of the stress of the riots.
That seems unlikely.
We would need to see some evidence that it had anything to do with January 6th, which we haven't. The very idea that all of these officers would unalive themselves because of a riot makes no sense to me. Does it make sense to any of you out there that these officers would all unalive themselves around the same time because of a riot? By that logic, we should have seen waves of officers unaliving themselves due to the sustained years worth of rioting by Democrats. What makes much more sense to me is that these officers either saw or knew something that made them a liability, and now they're part of the propaganda cover-up. All right, folks, what do you all think? Let me know in the comments, and if you're still here, might as well hit that like button and subscribe. Thanks a lot. I'll see you all on the next one.